Welcome to the Dylan Experience. Today is episode 79, and I've got a special guest for you again. But before we get to that, make sure you like, subscribe, follow the channel so you can keep up with us. My next guest is serving as the interim health and well-being director of the Military Service Initiative at the George W. Bush Institute. As a West Point graduate and former Army Special Forces officer, his skills have become essential in transitioning into the world of social impact and business. He is a principal partner at Applied Leadership Partners and co-chair of the Armed Services Arts Partnership. My guest has served in such esteemed positions as president of GORUCK and was the first executive director of Team Red, White, and Blue, a veterans nonprofit that has grown into one of the most trusted and effective organizations in the space. He is committed to helping improve the transition for his fellow veterans, so I'm excited to have Blayne Smith on the podcast today. Blayne, how are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. So, Blayne, you're clearly like incredibly well involved into the veteran space. But I'd love to hear kind of where you got that inspiration, where you got the motivation to kind of step into it, because it's not something that comes natural to everybody. And so do you mind kind of telling us, how did you transition into the work that you're doing now, and maybe include a little bit of your story?
Sure, happy to. I'll tell you that when I transitioned out of the Army in early 2010, my plan was to sort of close that chapter of my life, turn the page, so to speak, and just kind of move on. I got home from my second deployment in the summer of 2009. My second son was born like a week after I got home. And my younger son, I'd basically just not been around, not for not wanting to, but the life of a soldier and a special forces officer at that time was I was just gone all the time, basically. So I was excited to try something different, to sort of make a bit of a clean break. And I had really enjoyed my time in the Army. I thought well of it for the most part, but I was just excited to kind of try something new. And I had a little bit of excitement around the idea that maybe I could just grow into a new or a different person, and I wouldn't have to lean on my military experience or anything that I'd accomplished there in order to be successful outside the military. And I think, looking back on it now, I made a number of really big, really big misjudgments there. One was, being able to stay close to and lean on my military experience and the people that I'd served with in the military is obviously something now I think about as critical to my success, and something I would encourage everybody to do. And I just didn't see it and understand it at the time. The other thing was I grossly overestimated my ability just to sort of turn the page and move on. And like, oh, I'm not going to miss it that much. It'll be fine. I'd missed it quite a lot, many aspects of it. And I found life outside the military to be much harder in some unexpected ways than I'd planned. So I sort of bungled my transition getting out of the military, and I was really lucky in a number of ways. One was I got a pretty good job right when I got out. I didn't find that to be too tricky. And so I was at least able to make a living and provide for my family and feel like I had that going for me. But I wasn't finding a lot of purpose in it. I was just kind of going through the motions. And a friend of mine who I'd served with in the Army named Mike Irwin, who was the founder of Team RWB, had stayed in touch with me, and he and I would spend some time together and go for a run every now and then. He had this idea for a veterans nonprofit. And I said, yeah, I don't know. Okay. Yeah. Count me in. I'll raise a few bucks, run a marathon, do something like that. But I still didn't envision myself being, someone who's really like highly involved in the veterans space. I grew up as a kid, and you saw kind of Vietnam era veterans, with their hats on Veterans Day. And I was like, it's not really how I identify myself, Yeah. But in the face of some of the challenges I was having with my own transition, as those became a little bit more apparent, and as more opportunities were presented to me to do some things that were involved in the veteran space, I realized pretty quickly that it lit a bit of a spark in me, and that it was giving me a lot of what I was missing. And I could still go to work every day in my corporate job, but if I could raise some money and run some races and volunteer some time at a veterans nonprofit, it really started to matter to me. And a couple of years into that, Mike said, "Hey, I think we're at a point where we can bring somebody on full time, and we really want to grow this organization. Would you be interested in quitting your corporate job and working for the startup nonprofit?" And I was like, "Yeah, sounds great." and that was it.
It's it's really interesting to kind of see how many opportunities just kind of land in your lap when you're kind of just winging it in many ways. Like that's certainly something, like even now, like right now, this podcast was something that if you asked me 10 years ago I'd have a podcast, I'd be like, you're crazy. I would never do that. I would never do anything like what I'm doing now. And so like these these opportunities just seem to land in your lap when you least expect it. Um, Tell me a little bit about the that transition point of going full time. How did you kind of make that a reality for yourself of I'm all in on this and I'm here to help veterans? What did it take for you to kind of step into that mindset?
Yeah, so to go a little deeper here, I kind of glossed over this idea that I bungled my transition. The truth of the matter was I was struggling tremendously with my own mental health, and I was losing my marriage, and my family was kind of falling apart, largely as a result of that. And I got to a point where it was clear that I was probably going to get divorced, and my whole world and what I thought the future of my life was going to look like, because as a good kind of high achieving barrel chested freedom fighter, I thought I could just map out my whole life until death and it would just go according to that. That's not how things work.
Yeah.
So it was very difficult for me to know or predict what my future was going to be. And so the corporate job, the high salary, whatever, it didn't make as much sense as it used to. And I kind of had this moment where I thought, like, screw it. If my whole life's going to get shaken up and turned upside down, what's one more big change? I'll just kind of reboot and start over. And in some ways, I felt like I was sort of low enough that I didn't have a lot to lose. And again, like money and salary and those things just weren't feeling very important to me at the moment. And so I thought, yeah, I should just go ahead and do this and try to sink my teeth into some work that will really matter to me. And maybe that will be a good path to kind of becoming whole and living a life that's really consistent with my values. And it'll make me feel a bit more like who I am. Because what had really happened was I drifted away, part of it being environmental and part of it being kind of by choice. I drifted away from who I really was. I didn't feel like the guy that I had grown into in the first 30 or so years of my life. And what I noticed was when I was out training, running, working with veterans, being involved in this startup, it felt a lot closer to who I really felt like I was as a person. And so at a point, I just kind of knew I had to do it. And I wish I had a better, like, there was no spreadsheet, there was no pros and cons list. At a point, it was like, this just very deeply feels like the right thing to do, and I'm going to do it.
Right.
And the details, the practical details, just kind of had to work themselves out. And I was willing to sort that stuff out.
That's I love that. I love when, I mean, even me, I very much feel that when I came home from Afghanistan in 2019, I was kind of adrift. I felt like I had a lot of different things I could do, but I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And a few things happened that kind of led me to where I am now. And I was like, well, I'm going to write my book. And so when that kind of happened, that intuition just kicked on and said that, this is what I'm doing. And now here I am, like here we are, right? We're impacting our own spaces and individually and together in some ways. I'm curious, like how did you then transition from uh, it was the veteran space in terms of the nonprofit into George Bush Institute? Because that's obviously a pretty big thing. So tell me about that transition.
Yeah, that's another long and winding road that involves me screwing some things up. But I guess maybe there's a theme here. Um, so I was at Team RWB for 5 years as the executive director, and the organization did really well. We ended up getting a bunch of great people on the team. It took off, and it became really just an awesome organization that after 5 or so years, I felt like I didn't really, frankly, need me anymore. I had kind of done, I think, the work that I was really meant to do there, and it was doing great. It was a big enough organization. We raised plenty of money, solid team. And I was starting to think about what would be kind of the next step in my career. And I'd been on the board of advisors at GoRuck for a couple of years at that point. And I was offered an opportunity to come in and kind of be a minority partner in the business and be president of the organization. And I'd really grown to love Jason McCarthy, the founder there, and we were close. And I thought, man, this is perfect. It's a chance for me to kind of stay sort of in the veteran space and keep working on things that I'm close to and I care about, but go into the for-profit sector and try to grow a business. And it was everything I really wanted professionally. The one sort of snag for me was that we had to pick up and move from Tampa, where our family had kind of rooted down, and where I was co-parenting my sons, to Jacksonville Beach, Florida, where GoRuck is at. And there are a lot of reasons, I won't bore you with the details, but it seemed at the time like maybe that would actually work out okay for the family and for the kids. And so we moved up to Jacksonville Beach and was there almost a year at GoRuck, and it was going really well professionally. And I really liked it there, but it became clear that it wasn't the best thing for the kids, and being separated in distance with us and their mom and all of that. It became painfully obvious to me that I'd miscalculated that.
Yep.
And we really needed to get back to Tampa and get close to the boys, and really whatever that was going to take. And so again, I had a professional decision that was really made almost totally based on non-professional criteria. And I told Jason I had to step away from my role and go back to Tampa. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I didn't have a plan at all. And so I started calling a few people, and I let a few folks know that I was going to be making another transition. And I was really asking for advice more than anything, because I had no plan. It was another one of those deals where I had it all kind of mapped out way into the future. And now all of a sudden it was like, ooh, totally foggy. And one of the first people to call me was Matt Amadon at the Bush Institute and say, hey, what are you doing now? And I was like, I don't know. And he said, well, if you want to hang a consulting shingle, we have lots of work to do here at the Institute, and we'd love for you to come help. And so I said, okay. And they lined me up some work, and I sort of joined the team as a contractor, as a consultant, started working on some stuff. And some other organizations like Headstrong and the Green Beret Foundation and others reached out and said, hey, what are you doing right now? And I was like, I don't know. And so I just really started very quietly behind the scenes, consulting and advising nonprofits in the veteran space, mostly some other organizations too. And that was almost 5 years ago. And I've just continued to work with the Bush Institute, and my role has increased a little bit. And we've been able to really sink our teeth into some stuff that we think is going to make a big difference. And so I'm lucky to count those folks as colleagues, and they've taken such good care of me, and I've really, really loved the work, and I'm pumped to still be doing it.
Now I'm curious, what is the work that you're kind of centralized on? Obviously, you're the health and well-being director of Military Service Initiative. What does that actually mean? What are you guys actually doing with that, and how are you kind of impacting veterans and their families?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so there's a number of ways. The work, which we now call the Veteran Military Families Program at the Bush Institute, the work we do really focuses on economic opportunity and education, and then health and well-being. And I'm really responsible for the health and well-being part. And though that's a broad umbrella, we've really focused a lot of our effort on trying to create better opportunities for people to take care of their mental and brain health. Because as I'm sure you know, taking care of your physical health, critically important. That was what my life was all about at Team RWB. Get out, get moving, get connected, take care of your health. And that will affect your mental and your emotional health in a lot of positive ways. And I believe that as much as anybody on the planet. Yep. I also know through my time at Team RWB and in other places that there are things that people wrestle with, that going for a run or a CrossFit class or a coffee with your buddy are just not going to quite get to. Some of us, including myself at times, have really wrestled with our mental health in ways that we need some professional intervention. We need some perhaps evidence-based treatment to go in and get some counseling or go to therapy. And what we found was, in talking to sort of the leaders of all of these peer-based, community-based veterans organizations, was they were proud of and confident in what they were doing, but they were still bumping into people all the time that just needed something that wasn't quite in their wheelhouse, and they weren't quite sure what to do. Like, I can't diagnose a person. I don't want to feel responsible for navigating the mental health landscape and pointing them in the right direction, but I also don't want to do nothing. Right. And so this became a real challenge for the volunteers and the leaders and the staff of these organizations who were working with veterans every single day, who had earned their trust, who could see and understand their needs, but it just wasn't their job to do this really complex kind of clinical work. And they weren't sure where to turn. And so we started thinking about like, well, what if somebody could figure that out? What if there was a kind of easy button where if you're a volunteer at Team RWB or Team Rubicon and the mission continues and your buddy says, I don't think I'm right. I think something's off. I'm not sure what to do. You could get that person to a trusted resource really quickly and easily and right away. And so that's what we started building. It's a product now we call Check-In, which is a very simple, it's a website essentially. You can go to veterancheckin.org. Anybody can go there anytime, fill out a few brief pieces of information, essentially your contact information.
Sure.
You hit submit, and then a human being, a really great, awesome human being that's a licensed clinical social worker or a licensed professional counselor, and who understands who you are and what you're going through, who really, really understands the veteran landscape, the mental health landscape, the resources that are available. And they'll reach out to you proactively. You just hit submit, and an awesome human will reach out to you within a day or two or three tops. And they'll say, hey, I'm from the Veteran Wellness Alliance. I want to see if I can help. Let's talk about what you have going on. They do kind of a minimally invasive screening, and then they make a warm handoff. They get you an appointment. They get you hooked up with the best, most appropriate mental or brain health resource, be that in your geography or based on your needs. And you just kind of take it from there. So we've spent probably 4 years now building that. It sounds simple. It's not easy, but it's there. It's available now, and it's working.
I'm already kind of, the wheels are turning in my head of just how complicated it is to put that kind of network out there. And I can't even imagine what it would be like to try and put all that into place. And I'm, obviously been doing it for 4 years, so something's happening. Has it been effective? Have you put it into place and is it working?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, nothing is perfect at first, but we did almost 2 years of piloting of this in smaller geographic areas and with kind of smaller populations to do the best we can to work out all the bugs and the technology and the network and the process and all of that. And, we're almost up to 1,000 connections at this point. I mean, these are real people who have been connected via Check-In and have had a chance to get linked up with a really high quality, mental or brain health resource. And, do I wish it was 10,000? Do I wish it was 100,000? Yeah, I guess. And maybe someday it will be, but I'll tell you that 900 is a lot of people. Those are real humans, every single one of them. And so, I have people in my family, close friends of mine who I've connected via Check-In. I'm a user of one of those resources myself. And I think that says a lot. So yeah, I'm excited about where we've gotten to, but in many ways, we're just kind of rolling this out across all 50 states and open for business. And I'm really stoked to see, how many people we can serve over the coming years.
Well, I think the challenge isn't necessarily, this is my perspective on veterans. I don't think the challenge is as much what is available to veterans. It's getting veterans to actually use it. And has there been anything that you've kind of worked into or understood from kind of building Check-In and kind of facing that issue specifically?
Yeah, it's funny because I joke with my friend Ben, who lives here in Tampa with me, that when it comes to mental and brain health, veterans have the most access to the best care at the lowest cost of any population in America. And yet there's still a pretty understandable conversation about how it's not working for so many of us.
Yeah.
And I really do think you're spot on, is it's not necessarily a matter of access or affordability, but it's of knowledge of where to go, when, and how. It's just too vast, too convoluted. And so that was really the problem we were trying to solve, was not to put better care into the system or necessarily more care. It was to figure out a way to get people to the best care as easily as possible. Yeah. It's funny, as I have friends that are not military affiliated, they're not veterans. And if I feel like they could use some help for their mental or brain health, I'm actually not quite sure what to do.
Right.
I don't know if there's someone that's in network with their insurance plan or who's a good provider here in town. Like, it's very difficult. And I would say that in many ways, we're lucky as veterans, and we probably don't appreciate how many high quality resources there are out there. But I'll tell you that if you're just scrolling on your phone and hoping something's going to like smack you in the face and that's going to be the answer, it's probably not. There needs to be a trusted resource out there that can try to point you in the right direction.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much, I have a couple friends that work for, like the Wisconsin State, and they do kind of veterans resourcing. So they help veterans, and it's remarkable to hear what they have to say and tell me like just how many resources are available. Because I'm still actively serving in the National Guard, so like I get this information so I can give it to my people. But it's remarkable how much we have, and it's like a fire hose. Like we're not going to drink from it, because it's one, I think there's this idea that there's too much and it's too confusing and I just don't want to do it. Two, I think there's been a stigma, just built up over the years through two wars, and a history of culture that says suffer in silence. And I think we're just now, I think the Army itself is actually just now starting to recognize that and kind of proactively counter it. And I don't know if that's going to work or not. I know the newer generation of soldiers that I'm seeing are far more expressive. They're far more open. But it's leadership, right? We have to see that change in leadership of how people actually manage peacetime and also going to war, and how we actually manage those conversations. I always try to be open with my soldiers and tell them like, hey, there's going to be a time where I'm going to have to say, let's go, and I can't hear complaining, versus a time when we're going to take a step down and we're going to say, hey, what's going on? How you guys feeling? And I want a real answer. And I just don't know if we, as a military, but certainly not as veterans, have those kinds of conversations, right? I think you get out of the military and you're thinking like, I've got to go 100 miles an hour in a direction, and then you realize that the civilian world is like a roundabout with 468 exits, and you're like, I don't know which one to pick, and you get lost, right? It's so easy to transition out of the military and have no idea. And then, 3 or 4 years after a guy gets out of active duty, they come to the National Guard and they're like, wow, I think this might have saved my life. But at the same time, they're still, treading water, and at some point they're going to drown if they don't really connect with the civilian world, right? We look at the civilian world and we just don't have the conversation that says, I want to be a part of that. It's, I want to be with veterans, and that's it. I want to be with soldiers. I want to be with warriors. I don't want to talk to civilians. I don't want to be with them. And I think that's a transition point that we really need to address, because we're missing out,
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's why Team RWB's mission was to connect veterans to their community through physical and social activity, because we knew that at some point you're going to have to make a real authentic connection with people that are not from your same background.
Yeah.
And you can do that through shared suffering, through sweat, through community service. Well, let's figure it out, and let's make it happen. I think you bring up a good point, though, about how people will find things that make them feel a little better in the moment, whether that's joining up with the National Guard or going for a workout or any number of things. And I think it's all great. But I think there are still times when you're going to have to look yourself in the mirror and say, I got to work on this. Yeah. And it may not be fun and it may not be easy, but I've got to do the work. And I think if you're struggling with post-traumatic stress, or you've had a brain injury, or you're depressed, one of the number one symptoms of that is avoidance, right? So when you see any red tape, if you see any obstacle to getting where you need to go, you're gonna turn around when you hit that first barricade. You're gonna say, if you have the courage to reach out and try, and you don't get what you're looking for on the first attempt, it's understandable. And you might say, I knew I shouldn't have done that. But what I'm here to tell you is, what we've tried to build at the Bush Institute and with our partners is something that's as seamless and as easy as possible, but nothing is going to be perfect. And even if you get that first appointment with an awesome provider, and the first person you get linked up with is great, and they get you and you get on the right treatment path, it's still going to be work on your end. And this is what I think a lot of people don't get, is that should you work out? Yes. Should you want to learn Wim Hof breathing? You want to do ice bath? You want to do whatever? Yes. Do all those things that are good for your health and well-being. You should eat healthy. You should try to get plenty of sleep. But if you are still struggling, it might just be that you're going to have to go sit across from somebody, whether it's on a Zoom screen or in an office,
Yep.
Dig through some stuff that's uncomfortable to talk about, go through a process that's not necessarily pleasant. You're going to have to do that work for you, for your family, for your future. And there are a lot of good people who can help you do that in ways that are totally safe and effective. But it is not just going to happen for you. There's no miracle cure. There's no drug. There's no psychedelic. You are going to have, at some point, going to have to look at yourself and do some work to process what's going on that's holding you back. And you can, but you're going to have to do it.
And, I think that, that sums up everything. But I think, what you guys have built in such a, minimalistic and simplistic kind of entryway to that is powerful. It's profound. It's something that, like, keep it simple, stupid, right? It's the KISS method. Like, you can't mess that up. You throw in your information and someone calls you, that's incredibly easy, right? And you just got to do that. Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's, you got to have that willingness and that courage, that personal courage to step into it and say, all right, I'm going to expect that call. Right. And that's really profound. I really hope people kind of take advantage of this, because it's something that even the Army won't do that much for you, right? Like, you have to go through a whole SRP or SRC to get any kind of help provided by the military. And that's obviously not a throw your contact information up. That's a whole day of waiting in lines and telling people all sorts of stuff that you really don't want to tell them, because you're trying to get to the next person, and sometimes it's even the next person after that. So it's like, this is such a simplistic way of doing things that I think it could be really beneficial for people if they just took the initiative and the courage to reach out.
Yeah. I mean, the idea, like we said, was to create an easy button and to remove as much of the friction as we can. And so that's on us. We'll do our best to do that. The various clinical, providers and organizations will do their best once they've got their arms around you to get you what you need. But I just can't stress enough that, you've got to walk through the door still. I'll tell you just a little vignette of my history, which I've not shared with many people, is that in 2012, when it became obvious to me that I needed to go, talk to somebody, there weren't all these organizations. There was no Headstrong. There was no Cohen Veteran Network. There was none of that.
Yep.
And I didn't know what to do. And so I literally walked through the front door of the James A. Haley VA hospital in Tampa and talked to some nice lady in sneakers behind the front desk. She's like, how can I help you? And I was like, I think maybe I need to talk to somebody about like combat stress or something. And she's like, okay, are you enrolled for services here with VHA? And I was like, I don't think so. She's like, do you have an ID card? I said, no. She's like, okay. So I had to start at square one, and she helped me go back behind the desk and to the ID card place to make sure that I was even enrolled for healthcare. And of course, they couldn't just get me an appointment that same day. I wasn't even enrolled, but they took care of me, and they said, "What are you here for again?" And I said, "I just think I need to talk to somebody." And they're like, "Well, we'll get you set up with a primary care provider. We'll get you referred to the post-deployment clinic, but you can go down to the ER if you think you need to." And I was like, there's not one cell in my body that wants to walk my green beret butt down to the ER and tell them that I'm hurting and I don't have any physical injuries.
Yeah.
And I did. And I did, because I thought there was still a chance that maybe I could save my marriage, save my family. And it was worth it to me at that point. And I walked down there and I signed on a little sheet, and they said, "Hey, what can we help you with?" And I told them, and guess what they said to me? "Are you thinking of hurting yourself?"
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm embarrassed, and I say, "No, I just think I need to talk to somebody." So they pull me back, and some ER physician says, "Well, this isn't really what I do, but I see we have a consult here for you for post-deployment clinic, and I think you're going to be okay. And if you want to really talk to somebody today, you can go up and talk to the chaplain." I'm like, I'm not a particularly religious guy, but I just like, look, I'm just going to keep running down this rabbit hole until I can start making some progress. So I went upstairs and I talked to the chaplain. He sent me on my way eventually. And a week later, I got an appointment, and I went in and I talked, and I kind of laid it all out for the doc. And he said, "Whew, that's messed up." Wow. Congratulations, you're normal. What you've been through is crazy,
Yep.
and you're having a human reaction to that, and it's going to be okay. And it was amazing. And the fog had lifted, and I still had a lot of work to do, but none of that happens if I'd have turned back at any one of those points along the way. And
Yeah.
I've done plenty of things in my life I'm not super proud of. That is one thing that I'm really proud of, because the whole
Should be.
rest of my life might have been different if I had made another choice.
Not many people, I think, have the boldness or the courage to continue that. I think a lot of people would step in and say, after that first kind of hitch of, you can go down to the emergency room, or even like, there's no one here to talk to, you can go talk to the chaplain, like, people turn back, be like, no, it's okay, right? Like, don't waste your efforts on me, kind of thing. I think there's that selflessness that we kind of carry into the civilian world, where we're like, uh, I'm not worth it, right? Somebody else needs it more than I do. And the reality is that we have to kind of turn off a little bit of our selflessness and turn on a little bit of our selfishness to to remain respectful of ourselves and empathetic towards ourselves, more specifically, of like, we've been through really hard stuff, like terrible things, and to not respect that and to not empathize with ourselves. uh it's really hard to have courage if all we do is remain selfless and look at other people as if they need things more than I do. There are some things that you need more than other people, and you deserve, as a veteran, that time to reflect and understand yourself and understand your service. And I think, Blayne, it's amazing to hear someone else's story of success in the mental health system in general, right? Let alone a veteran. Like, I mean, like, just anyone going through the mental health system and gaining perspective, gaining clarity, and gaining, what you've gained, um, is remarkable. And I want more of that. I want to hear more of that. I want more of those stories to be told and be explained, because it that's what we need. We need people to realize that this path is actually a lot more simple. It's a lot more beneficial and a lot less stigmatized than we've come to believe.
Yeah, and look, I'll tell you something I learned through my own personal experience is that, that pronounced sense of selflessness um, can actually be pretty selfish. It can be a form of avoidance. It can be a form of a way of hiding, right? I'm just here for everybody else. I just help others out. I don't need anything. Yeah, great. But you're not doing yourself or anybody else a service by not being willing to raise your hand or take a knee when you need to, right? Because it would have been just as easy to, I heard the VA's messed up and look, they're screwing me. They can't get me an appointment today, right? Hiding, avoidance. Again, highly correlated if you're struggling with your mental health, but we have to be willing to get past that. I read years ago in one of Brene Brown's book that if you're a person who always wants to help others and you never accept help, that you're actually judging those people that you're helping without knowing it.
Mm-hmm.
I read that and it hit me like a Mike Tyson punch to the face.
Yeah.
Because I would have loved to have considered myself someone who's not at all judgmental. And I would love to have considered myself selfless, and generous. And when I really thought about that, rather than just dismissing it, I really thought about it and I thought, man, I think that's true. I think if I will not accept help from others, but I'm always going out of my way to help other people, like maybe there's some judgment in that. And when that word popped up into my field of view, I was like, oh no, I can't be that.
Yeah.
I got to figure this out. But we need that. We need occasionally to be challenged. And as veterans, especially, we need to be poked in the eyeball every now and then and said, hey, maybe you need to rethink that. And it's like, those moments haven't been fun for me. They haven't always been easy, but
Nope.
I definitely needed them.
Yeah, I think there needs to be, if you're willing to judge people, the first person you judge is you. You have to. And you have to do it with some sense or some ability to be unbiased in that judgment, right? You have to be willing to say, am I good at expressing myself? and look at that from an unbiased perspective, right? Like for me, I look at that question 10 years ago and I would have been like, no, absolutely not, if I was honest. But back then I was like, yeah, I know how to express myself. Yeah, I'm good. Right. But I was never being unbiased. I was never being honest back then. And so, like, the real honest answer to that question then was absolutely not. I have no idea how to express myself. I have all of these thoughts in my head that are wanting to get out, and they come out in anger, frustration, exactly, avoidance. They come out in me isolating myself and putting myself away and not talking to anybody. Um, and I have no idea how to stop that. I have no idea how to want to be with people. And now, like, I have a podcast that I talk to people on. Like, this is the whole point of it, is like to express myself and talk about what I've been through, and also and listen to other people share what they've been through. And it's like, I've actually built this podcast to uh, directly counter my want and desire to avoid talking to people, right? Like my uh, what is my internal kind of want to be an introvert. uh, I use this to counter it. So I have to talk to people. I'm like, oh, I got a podcast episode today, I'm going to talk to somebody today. um, Not that I don't talk to people every day, but it forces me to go outside my comfort zone, talking about things like my mental health, which, is something that, in being a social media influencer and being a mental health coach, I have to be particularly careful with, because I talk to people who go through incredibly difficult things, and if I'm being judgmental of them because I think I'm the one that has to help them, just like Brene Brown said, like, I absolutely understand that, right? And I recognize that when I am doing too much for people, I'm not actually understanding people. I stop listening as much. I start giving more advice than I am listening. And that's always a mistake on my part. That's always when I recognize, wait a second, Dylan, what's going on? This isn't how you do business, right? Like, I have to take a step back and recognize, what am I doing that is not respectful of myself, is not taking care of myself. And my clients and I have a very I try to make it as healthy of a relationship as possible. If, like, listen, I can't fix you, I can't help you, I can't change anything. All I can do for you is give you a person to talk to. That's that, and I'm really good at that. I'm really good at listening to you, but I can only do it when I can do it. And that's on me, right? Like, I have limitations. I do the best I can, and I put all these boundaries and these healthy understandings of communication out there, of like, hey, you can email me 12 times over the weekend, but I may not respond because I want to spend time with my family. I want to be here. I want to be here. And that's all up front, so that they know, right? So there's no denial of, Dylan cares about me or doesn't care about me because he hasn't responded to my 12 emails. It's like, no, Dylan does care about you, but Dylan also cares about himself. And there's got to be a symbiotic relationship there for us to actually function together, right? I don't want to judge you, and I don't want you to judge me. And so we put everything out in clarity and say, hey, how are we going to communicate this? And, when you really start to negotiate first with yourself, I think it's a remarkable difference when you actually start negotiating with people, right? Like, hey, Dylan, what can you do? What can you actually do and still be comfortable? And when I started my business, I was like, I don't want to do more than like 3 or 4 meetings a day. And I found out real quick that was a really good idea. And I put in 30-minute buffers between my sessions, because it's hard to listen to people all day talk about their problems, especially when I have my problems. and that's what you have to do. You have to be able to look at yourself and say, what can you do? And when you do make those mistakes, as both you and me have made, you reassess and you say, okay, I got to change things, and here's the clarity for people. And I think that's a place where I think veterans really need to dig in and recognize that they have to be able to negotiate with themselves and recognize what they can do and what they can't.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a ton of good points there. I mean, I think you mentioned the word boundaries, which I think is super important. The other word I would throw in there is just having a healthy differentiation. And my business partner and I, we do a ton of leadership development. We work with a lot of people that are, going through their own, whether it's struggles at work or personally. And I will tell you that there's sort of a healthy balance point between being checked out, being avoidant, distant, that kind of thing, disengaged, which we see a lot in the workplace, right?
Yep.
And being totally sort of enmeshed or like over identifying with what you have going on.
Right.
And think about your service in the military. I know when I was in the military, I was on active duty, I was an SF guy. Everything about my life revolved around that one little pod of people. Those are my friends, they're my colleagues, they're my brothers. That's how I earned a living. It's how I identified myself. And when I lost that, I really struggled. And I don't really regret, I guess, over identifying with my military career because it was so serious. But I do regret not having an awareness of the fact that I was going to have to be a whole and differentiated person that wasn't just completely wrapped up in my identity as a soldier, right? Because what happens then is when you become, when that doesn't work for you, you go way to the other spectrum, become disengaged. You're like, nah, this isn't working, I'm out, right? And being able to have friends, colleagues, professional work that you care about and are willing to invest in, even like, let's say, your own mental health. These are things that are a component of you. These are things that you want to invest in and spend time. You want to work out to be physically strong and healthy. You want to, seek some help if you need to, so that your mental and brain health can be squared away. You want to have a relationship with your family and your kids. You want to, right? Those are all different aspects of who you are. And when you over-identify with any one of them, you might start running into some challenges, right? And so whether you're someone like you and I who do some coaching and work with people through their challenges, or whether you're a person who, has faced some hard stuff and you got to work through some things, you almost don't even want to over-identify with your mental health challenges because, yeah, they're real and let's get some work done there, but it's not who you are. You're a lot of different things. And I think it's really important to note that, while I was, going to see my therapist every Monday morning at 7 a.m., I was also working a full-time job. I was crushing it at work, killing my sales number out there in the field. I was going to CrossFit every evening, making friends, deadlift, squat, power cleans. Like I was a whole person. And that's what really allowed me to move into a much better place. It wasn't just that 1 hour at 7 a.m. every Monday. It was the fact that that was giving me a window into kind of a better version of myself and allowing me to process some of the stuff I was hanging on to so that I could leave there and get in my car and go to work. And so that I could get out of my car at the gym and go work out with my friends. And so I could go home in the evening and be present for my kids. So if you think that in order for you to like work on yourself, that you've got to like let go of all those other priorities in your life, I think you need to take a long, hard think about that. Because this is the other thing I've seen a lot of in the veteran space is that people avoid dealing with the hard stuff long enough to where now it becomes like, hey, this is urgent. And then they finally say, okay, I'm going to like go away. I got to work on myself. So they go off and it's like,
Yep.
I don't know, man, like your wife and your kids probably still need you. Like there's a lot of purpose, by the way, on paying the bills and holding down a good job. And again, you have these wild fluctuations of like, I'm not going to work on it, I'm not going to work on it. Now I got to go be selfish and work on myself. And it's like, hey, dude, you probably could recognize this earlier in the process, go once a week or whatever you need to do, maybe go off on a 3 or 4 day weekend with your buddies and do some backpacking or hiking. Like, yeah, let's get those small regular doses of goodness so that you can have a whole, complete kind of balanced life.
Yep.
But don't wait until that balloon pops and then decide you've got to totally disengage and unplug from your life to go get right. Because, maybe that's right for some people. I will tell you my personal experience is that typically does not work out really well.
No, I think one of the consistent things that happens in my sessions is we reflect on the past week, right? If you're coming to me weekly, it's our sessions. People, yeah, I'm going to be honest. Most people don't remember 99% of what I said, or what they said, or what we talked about. What they remember is the 1% that stuck with them all through the week, and everything else that they did that informed them and informed their perspective on how they look at life. And they thought about that for 6 days. And then they came back and was like, Dylan, we got to talk about this, because this is the persistent thought. That's the work, right? Like, it has, honestly, coming to, for people that work with me, and I imagine people work with therapists, and other mental health professionals, they go there, and that's a respite for, that's actually somewhat comfortable in some ways, right? It's comfortable because you can actually express yourself and be you, right? Even if that's a darker version of you, you can still be you. But then the hard work is, between those sessions, you have to think, and you have to think on your own, and you have to be yourself, but you have to be yourself inside as well. Of like, there's a dark version of me I don't know how to bring out. There's a happy version. There's all sorts of different parts of you that want to come out and be, you know, shown to the world, but you're still kind of masking all of that, all of those parts of you that you don't know. Can I show this to people? Can I show this to people? Can I be like this with people? And in the back of your mind, you're still thinking about that conversation that was deeply introspective and reflective of who you are and your identities. And I think that's the real hard work. And I think it's remarkable that, you, with your app, the check-in app, that this is kind of pushing people to allow someone else to kind of bring that to you, and kind of offer that in a way of, hey, here's a respite for you. Here's a place for you to be you, and I just need some information, and then I'm gonna have someone reach out to you. And that's really, I think that's a remarkable kind of transition from what has been said in the last 15 years of, go find help. What's wrong with you? Go find help, right? This kind of shameful, well, he should have found help, looking at soldier suicide and being like, well, I mean, what can we do? You guys need to reach out to people. You guys need to call someone. Well, and I know veterans who've called, 50, 60, 100 times people in their networks, and no one's answered. And so I think it's remarkable that we now have something like this where, someone will check in on you, because I get, every day I get messages that say, you're the only person that texts me, because I have a text platform with 1,500 people on it that I text every day. I just send out something that's motivational or inspirational. Some like one of the texts, for this coming week is going to be, you're incredible. I just want you to know that, right? And that's it, right? But it's something that, like, people respond with of, thank you. You're the only one that does something like this for me. You're the only person that reaches out to me and tells me I have good qualities to me. And I think we need more of that.
You know what I think that really highlights is that there are a lot of people in today's world that feel alone, misaligned, not quite right.
Yeah.
And what happens is, especially if you really, if you used to fly helicopters, or you're an Army Ranger or a Marine or whatever, and you're feeling like a little less than the best version of yourself, it's easy to think that you're the only one that feels that way, or there's something wrong with you for feeling that way. And what you need to know is that lots of people feel that way all the time. And sometimes they feel that way today and they feel better tomorrow. But at any given moment in time, there are millions and millions of people all over this planet that feel like they're having a bad day, or that no one really cares about them. I mean, it's way, way more common than we think. And we can look for some affirmation on social media or the internet, or whatever. And look, if that works for you, that's fine. But I need you to know that there are a lot of people that are going through almost exactly what you're going through at any time. And so the idea that doing something as simple as like going to veterancheckin.org and filling out your information, like there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing broken about you. Chances are the fact that you might want someone to reach out to you and help you kind of navigate that system, like that's totally normal. We all want that. And there's no time to keep kind of pushing back up against that. Like we've already talked about, you can be an awesome version of yourself and, go get some help if you need it. It's not an or condition. It's not a but, right? You can be somebody. I mean, think about the people that that are the highest performing people, the people that you're most impressed with, that you most look up to. I would be willing to bet you almost anything. Those people are investing in their own mental health, their own brain health. They're taking time out of their day to make sure that they've got their stuff dialed in so that they can show up and be the best version of themselves at work, with their family, with their friends, on the field of play, you name it. Right.
Yeah.
So why don't you just join those people and think of it as something that's actually really positive rather than, something that's perhaps feels negative at first.
The analogy that always has spoken to me is kind of referencing sports. The best athletes have the most coaches. And that's when you really look at that, it's the same as the highest performing people have the most people looking at them and helping them work through their weaknesses. And that's it, right? Like that's what we're talking about here, is if you don't have anybody that can look at you and help you kind of reflect and look inward and say, here's something we need to think about, and here's something we need to consider or work on or talk about, then you're doing that all by yourself, and that's never beneficial. I did that for 20 years. I did everything by myself for 20 years, and that almost didn't work out for me, right? Like that almost ended my life by my own choice, and that wasn't good for me, right? That would have been terrible, because in the other room, I have this little 6-month baby girl that never would have happened, right? I never would have experienced that pure joy when she sees me after I walk out of this podcast and looks at me and smiles with that big toothless grin. You can't even understand or fathom what it's like to go through, these incredibly hard moments and look 10 years in the future and realize like that there might be another person there that you created, or someone that you impacted or affected, right? Like the work that you've done, you got through to now impact 900 people with the work that you've done. And that's just where you are now. Like in the future, more will come, right? If you build it, they will come, kind of thing. So I really want people to invest in this and look into the idea of saying, if I want to perform, if I want to be the best that I can be, well, I need more coaches, right? If you want to be like Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers or Lionel Messi or LeBron James, you need more people helping you get there and helping you understand yourself, and you can't do that alone. And so I think this is a great opportunity, and I really think people need to jump on it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Just this idea that you're going to figure it out. If you just think about it hard enough, you're going to figure it out. I mean, I've been there. We've all been there, right?
Yep.
I mean, I have a 16-year-old son, and every day I'm like, hey, man, what can I help you with? What's going on? And he's like, I just got to figure this out. I'm like, you're 16, dude. Like you're super smart. You're a great kid, but you don't have the skills or the experience just to figure everything out. And there's no shame in throwing a flag and being like, Dad, can you help me think through this? But he won't, because he's a teenager and he's convinced that he can, if he thinks about it hard enough, he can just figure it out. And that little bit of perspective, just being able to step to the side a little bit and have someone help you see things a slightly different way, it can change your whole life. I mean, it's when you're in a bad spot, you can see all the negative, and there's plenty of negative in the world for you to latch on to. If that's what you want, you'll find it at every turn. But like, there's also a lot of beautiful a lot of wonderful stuff in the world. And if you can have someone help you to see a little bit of that, and I have a little girl as well. Sometimes a little girl can be great for that.
Yep.
But if you don't have one, you need a friend, a coach, a therapist, somebody to help you see some of that, because the chances are you have a lot of potential, a lot of wonderful things out there that are definitely worth living for. And sometimes it's hard to see. I get it.
Yep. Absolutely. No, Blayne, this has been great. What's coming down the pipe with the Bush Institute, with check-in? Is there anything coming up that you want to highlight or talk about?
I'll say there's a lot of great work going on behind the scenes, but I really want people to just go to veterancheckin.org. Go there and check it out. You can find a lot of, by the way, if mental and brain health isn't something that you feel like is really up your alley right now, or you're not quite ready for, maybe you don't need, there's a list of amazing peer and local organizations on there that you can link up with. Through that website, you can find Team RWB, the Travis Manion Foundation, Mission Continues, Team Rubicon, Student Veterans of America, Wounded Warrior Project. You can go there and get linked up with organizations that can get you out running, working out, volunteering, doing disaster relief. Those are all awesome things to be doing too. And while you're there, if you want to check out some of the mental and brain health organizations and just cruise around, do that. I'm not here to tell you your business. I don't know exactly what you need. What I do know is if you go there, there's a lot of great organizations that are doing a lot of great work for veterans, and it's at least worth checking out. And if you or someone you care about, you feel like could use a little help, it's like 5 fields. It's like name, email address, zip code, submit. It couldn't be easier. So, give it a shot. Well, I think we'll take good care of you. And I don't know, you have nothing to lose there. It's all upside.
Yeah. I'm at veterancheckin.org, and it's like, 5-6 lines. That's it.
Yeah. And you can connect yourself, or you can connect someone you care about. So either way is fine, but I'm excited about it. It's like, it's not like I have some sort of quota to make or financial upside in this or anything like that. It's just something
people.
A lot of good folks have put a lot of work in over the last several years. And it's just amazing that it's up and running, and we just want people to use it. I've heard once that, the meaning of life is to find your purpose, and the purpose of life is to give it away. And this feels like one of those things for me, where I've had a chance to do a lot of cool stuff. But I find this to be very purposeful, and it's built now, and we're giving it away. So just use it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Blayne, I appreciate you. I appreciate your work. I appreciate all the people behind you doing all sorts of, the back alley stuff and the work in the background. I would love to give you the opportunity to answer the question that I ask everybody. If there was one message you could leave the world, Blayne, what would it be?
Just show up. Show up. Don't be afraid. Don't hide. Don't avoid. You've got something worth giving to someone. And we need you. We need people more than ever to show up. Be who you are. Don't be afraid. Show up. Do the thing. Get on the trail. Figure it out. Take your time. We need you. So show up.
Well spoken, Blayne. Absolutely well spoken. Thank you so much for taking your time and giving me and showing up yourself and giving me this opportunity to have a conversation with you. I've enjoyed it. And then for those of you that are still listening to this, thank you for showing up, and thank you for listening to this. And I hope you the best day that you can have, and we'll catch you next time on the Dylan Experience. And that is it.